Kenneth Murray Jr., the 23rd overall selection in the draft over the weekend. The Los Angeles Chargers trade up with the New England Patriots to take him. And we're all excited about that because that's not just 2 first-round picks for Oklahoma, but it is the first-round selection on the defensive side of the ball for Oklahoma since Gerald McCoy in 2010. A win that Riley really needed on the recruiting trail to be able to show, especially from a guy that was rated a 3-star coming out of high school, so you overproduced there. But looking at his position, I think we both classify him as a will, right? He called himself a Mike, they called him a Mike, but the position he played on the football field is will. Assuming DaShaun White is that guy that's going to play the middle linebacker position and basically be the captain on that defense in at least the calls, we're looking at a real interesting group of names here at the will linebacker position that I think includes not just Brian Meade, Brian Asamoah, but also Caleb Kelly, which I think many people think ought to win the job, but Robert Barnes and Jamal Morris also moving down there make this interesting. How do you handicap this?
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, Meade is going to have to be the backup Mike to DaShaun White. You want someone that they trust, and I believe that they trust Brian Meade, as he saw some pretty meaningful time last year, and so as a result, I would say that slots him to the other side, which means, in my opinion, Caleb Kelly is probably the front runner easily to take the will spot, with Brian Asamoah kind of being that next up. But I find this incredibly intriguing because you mentioned Kenneth Murray was considered the Mike, but he also sort of played the will. He was allowed to be more aggressive, free-flowing, go sideline to sideline. But what I also found fascinating about his role last year, RJ, was the fact that in those dime packages specifically, he was asked, okay, can you step up to the line of scrimmage and rush the passer? It was that specific package that gave Texas fits in the Cotton Bowl. So who's going to do that? Who can be that linebacker that steps up to the line and provides a pass rush? In my opinion, I think Caleb Kelly is at his best when he's able to go after the quarterback. Now, I want to see, will they allow him to do that? Because that means you're taking DaShaun White off the field. So that's what really fascinates me about this quote-unquote position battle is, how do they not only replace Kenneth Murray as a sideline-to-sideline playmaker in the run game or passing game, but how do they replace him from a pass rushing standpoint? Because what he was able to do off the edge in Grinch's scheme was disruptive and destructive for opposing offenses to handle. And whoever does that will have big shoes to fill next season.
No, you bring up a great point there in Murray's ability to line up in 1'9" and go kill the quarterback, or at least make it difficult for people to function in that backfield. And Caleb Kelly has shown in the past that one of the best things that he does at Oklahoma is blitz. I find this interesting, right? Because Shane Witter and where he slots is going to tell us a lot. But also, can Jamal Morris or Robert Barnes provide something like that, right? Because if they can't, it's an easier decision to make, because that's usually what has to happen. Like, one of the things that I thought was interesting about how Grinch chose to run the defense last year is he kept saying over and over again, I want to play as many guys as I possibly can. Some guys just, I can't play, right? And you were looking at the safeties where he basically didn't rotate in anybody, ever. It was Pat Fields and Delarian Turner-Yell. At linebacker, you thought like he could do that a little bit more, but Brian Meade and Brian Asamoah both were out of position more than they were in position, so much so that when Murray was not on the field, it was noticeable, right? So I'm interested there. Now, it's going to tell us a lot about the shape of the defense, let alone who's going to be, perhaps those two inside guys. The other part about that I wanted to ask was quite simply, do we expect this to be a deep group? Do we expect this group to be able to rotate in as much as Grinch would prefer? Especially when you have new faces, Witter, right? But also guys that haven't played that position ever in Barnes and Morris. And whether or not we think that Meade should be a backup, he's still a walk-on. And I think people forget that, right? He's a redshirt senior walk-on. I think I got that right. So it almost feels like a Caleb Gastelum situation for those of you that remember that name.
That's a name right there. And this is also a situation that you bring up that's very intriguing because, as you mentioned, Grinch wants depth. And I personally believe that DaShaun White and Caleb Kelly are very good football players. I think that both were able to provide a little bit of boost when they were in there. I thought Caleb Kelly had a very good game in the Big 12 title game. I thought DaShaun really came into himself as that cohort next to Kenneth Murray. But at the same time, with K9 gone and you being unable to rotate those three as you saw them do, that's going to ask more of those other guys. And I think of all of them, I would bet the most on Brian Asamoah off the bat. I think Witter is going to be able to do something if he can learn quickly. I also would acknowledge your point that Meade is still a walk-on, and I did see some times where it was quite noticeable that he was out there. I think he's solid, but at the same time, I would also trust maybe one of those other guys a bit more if I need to go in a crunch time with someone subbing in for DaShaun White. So I think when you ask the depth question, on paper, it's a group that looks deep, but at the same time, I think that this is going to be a group that will have plenty of learning to do as a cohesive unit because they just frankly haven't been asked too much of before this because K9 was able to do it all. So I think Caleb Kelly, DaShaun White will have to carry the load a lot beginning the season. But as you go on, I think that's where you'll really start to see that depth emerge as these guys get experience and a little bit more comfortable with their roles moving forward.
So let's go from the first round to the second round. The Philadelphia Eagles, I think, surprised all of us when they used their 53rd overall pick on Jalen Hurts. And then Howie Roseman gave a quote that I think speaks to how little Howie Roseman watches of, college football. He said, "We look at Jalen Hurts the way that we looked at Nick Foles," to which I said, Nick Foles came off the bench to lead you through the playoffs and win a Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts got sat on the bench in the biggest game of his life in the national title game. I don't think that's the comparison you want to make. That said, they think the world of him because you don't take somebody in that spot that you don't expect to take over as the starting quarterback at some point, right? I thought it was a really interesting pick. If for no other reason than you got to assume that Carson Wentz is going to get hurt because he's been getting hurt. You definitely needed someone that you could depend on back there because that's really been a place of a weakness for them. Wentz goes down, they don't have anybody else that is capable of carrying the team. And I haven't actually seen Jalen Hurts have to carry a team because he's had a CeeDee Lamb. He's had a Jerry Jeudy. He's had outstanding running back play. He's had outstanding offensive line play. It was a curious decision. So let's start with that. Did you like it?
When grading the picks, I gave it a C because not only because of what you bring up, you say, okay, you take a guy there, you expect him to play. You also take a guy there and you don't address some of the other needs that they have in that roster. That to me means you better be playing him a lot because they could have gone wide receiver 2 or 3 times in that draft, in my opinion. And for them not to do it. And by the way, it was also surprising when they picked Rager over Jefferson. That's just me getting off track, but Hurts to be the guy there and for them to say, look, we knew we weren't going to get him the next time we were drafting him, so we wanted him here. That speaks volumes to me because I thought they could have easily gone with some more weapons to help out Wentz. They could have gone maybe on the offensive line to protect Wentz, but instead they got a guy that will be subbing in for Wentz. So in my opinion, it's a head scratcher at best, right? I think they're probably planning on utilizing him in a Taysom Hill kind of way. You know how I feel about that. Taysom Hills don't grow on trees, everybody. Get that out of your head. And Jalen Hurts right now is still a guy learning the game of football. You saw him do that in his one season at OU. That's why he was able to finally get in a standing where the Eagles could take him at 53. But this guy is still trying to grow as a football player. You cannot convince me he's ready to play in 4 or 5 different positions while also learning an entirety of an offense as a backup quarterback and eventual heir apparent. It's just, I don't want to say I'm concerned about the pick, but to me, the Eagles could have gone in several different directions there. It was not a position of need, in my opinion. And for them to take Hurts in that spot, I would hope they have a plan to utilize him effectively, or in my opinion, it's just a sad pick in the end of it all.
So a couple things there. Not only heir apparent, but you just gave Carson Wentz a really big contract extension. So it's not like he's going anywhere. The second part about that, you said Taysom Hill don't grow on trees, and I'm going, Joe Webb is Taysom Hill. There's there are athletes that can throw footballs out there. And you know what? There are athletes that can throw footballs out there that haven't had knee surgeries in college, by the way. I can't get behind Taysom Hill as a need, a gadget player, a guy that is nice to have if you have the roster space. But if that's the way that you're looking at Jalen Hurts and you're not looking at him as a quarterback, then you've screwed this up several different ways. That said, we got to move on to what Oklahoma's going to do. And do we need to really spend more time yelling about Spencer Rattler's going to get the job? Is that what we need to do?
I don't think so. I think this one's kind of cut and dry if we do say so ourselves. I mean, Spencer Rattler's the dude. He's taken over. Everyone thinks he's going to be the next special quarterback at the University of Oklahoma, and I don't blame him.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see what he's able to accomplish next year.